a thick wooden walking stick. That was the weapon Mark Miller used against his wife, Elena, who was 7 months pregnant with his child. He thought she was just a helpless orphan with no family and no money. He thought he could beat her, throw her out into the snow, and move his mistress in without consequence. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Mark didn't know that the woman bleeding out on his driveway wasn't just a nobody. She was the lost, protected sister of the Blackwood Brothers, the 3 most ruthless billionaires in New York City. And when they saw what Mark had done to their little sister, they didn't just get mad, they started a war. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, the sound echoing through the cold, empty expanse of the suburban villa in Greenwich, Connecticut. Elena Miller sat at the dining table, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly. The dinner she had prepared 5 hours ago, roast lamb with rosemary, Mark's favorite, was stone cold and congealed on the china plates. Elena was 7 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen, her back ached, but the pain in her heart was far worse. Mark hadn't come home for dinner for 3 weeks straight. He claimed it was mergers and acquisitions at Miller Tech, the mid-sized logistics company he had inherited from his father. But Elena knew better. She smelled the perfume on his shirts. Chanel No. 5, heavy and distinct. It wasn't hers. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway made her flinch. She stood up, smoothing down her maternity dress, trying to look presentable. The front door burst open. Mark Miller stumbled in, his face flushed with alcohol. He wasn't alone. Hanging off his arm, giggling in a shrill, piercing voice, was Jessica Thorne. Jessica was everything Elena wasn't. Sharp, malicious, and draped in a red dress that cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. She was Mark's secretary, and she had been making Elena's life a living hell for months. "Mark?" Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "What is she doing here?" Mark looked at his wife with a sneer of pure disgust. "Stop whining, Elena. Jessica is here because I invited her. This is my house." "It's our house, Mark," Elena said, stepping forward. "And I am your wife. I am carrying your son." Jessica laughed, walking over to the dining table and picking up a piece of the cold lamb with her fingers, then tossing it back onto the plate with a grimace. "Mark, honey, she cooks like a peasant. I told you she doesn't fit in your world anymore. Miller Tech is about to go public. You need a queen, not a whatever this is." Mark's eyes darkened. He walked over to the corner of the room where an antique walking stick, a heavy piece of polished oak with a brass handle, rested. It had belonged to his grandfather. He picked it up, weighing it in his hands. "You're right, Jess," Mark slurred. He turned to Elena. "I'm done, Elena. I'm done with your sad face, your cheap clothes, and your boring life. I want a divorce. Sign the papers tomorrow. Tonight, you get out." "Get out?" Elena gasped, clutching her stomach. "Mark, it's 20 degrees outside. It's snowing. I have nowhere to go. I have no family, you know that." "Not my problem," Mark snapped. "Jessica is moving in tonight. We need the space." "I won't leave," Elena said, a sudden spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "For the sake of my baby, I am staying right here." Mark's face twisted into a mask of rage. The alcohol had stripped away his mask of civility. "You won't leave?" He swung the stick. It wasn't a warning shot. He swung with intent. The heavy oak cracked against Elena's shoulder, sending a shock wave of agony through her body. She screamed, falling to her knees, instantly curling into a ball to shield her unborn child. "Mark! Stop!" she cried out. "I told you to get out!" Mark roared. Whack! The stick came down again, this time striking her thigh. Whack! It hit her ribs. Jessica stood by the fireplace, sipping a glass of wine she had poured for herself, watching the violence with a twisted smirk. "Teach her a lesson, Mark. Show her who's boss." Elena couldn't breathe. The pain was blinding. She tasted blood in her mouth. Mark grabbed her by her hair, dragging her across the hardwood floor toward the front door. She clawed at the rug, at the doorframe, sobbing, begging not for herself, but for the baby. "Please, Mark. The baby. Don't kill him." Mark opened the front door and shoved her with his boot. Elena tumbled down the 3 stone steps, landing hard on the frozen asphalt of the driveway. The impact knocked the wind out of her. "If I see you here in the morning," Mark spat, standing in the warm glow of the doorway with a stick still in his hand. "I'll finish the job." He slammed the door. The lock clicked. Silence returned to the neighborhood, broken only by the howling winter wind. Elena lay in the snow, wearing only a thin dress. The cold began to seep into her bones immediately. She tried to stand, but her legs screamed in protest. She felt a warm, terrifying wetness sliding down her legs. Blood. "I'm losing him," she thought, panic overtaking the pain. "I'm losing my baby." She crawled. She didn't have her phone. Mark had smashed it a week ago. She crawled toward the decorative bushes near the gate, where she had hidden a go-bag months ago when Mark's temper had first started showing. Inside that bag wasn't money or clothes. It was a single, old-fashioned burner phone with one number saved on speed dial. She had promised them she would never call. She had wanted to live a normal life, away from the burden of her family's terrifying wealth and power. She wanted to be loved for herself, not her name. That was why she became Elena the orphan. But Mark had broken the contract of their marriage. He had tried to kill her child. With shaking, bloody fingers, she dug the phone out of the snow-covered bag. She pressed the single button. It rang once. Status. A deep, robotic-sounding voice answered. It wasn't a voicemail. It was a direct line to a security command center. Code. Red. Elena whispered, her voice failing. "Mark, beat me. The baby. Help." The line went silent for a millisecond. Then a voice, a human voice, sharp and terrified, broke through. It was Julian. "Elena, where are you? Talk to me." "Home," she gasped, darkness closing in around her vision. The stick. "Jessica." The phone slipped from her hand into the snow. Elena Sterling, the secret princess of the Blackwood Empire, lost consciousness as the snow began to cover her bruised body. St. Mary's Hospital was the closest trauma center. A neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, had seen the commotion from her window, the shouting, the figure thrown into the snow, and had called 911. Elena was rushed into surgery. Placental abruption, broken ribs, a fractured tibia. The doctors were fighting a war on two fronts, saving the mother and saving the premature child. In the waiting room, the atmosphere was chaotic. Nurses were rushing back and forth. But at 2 a.m., the chaos suddenly froze. The automatic doors of the hospital entrance slid open, and a blast of cold air entered, followed by 3 men who seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. They didn't walk. They marched. On the left was Adrian Blackwood, 6'4", built like a tank, wearing a black tactical trench coat. He was the CEO of Blackwood Defense, a private military contractor. His face was a map of scars and suppressed rage. His eyes scanned the room like a predator looking for a threat to neutralize. On the right was Sebastian Blackwood, dressed in a bespoke Italian suit that probably cost more than the hospital wing. He was the face of the family, the CEO of Blackwood Media and Law. He was handsome, charming, and utterly terrifying in his silence. He was already on his phone, his voice a low, lethal murmur. In the center walked Julian Blackwood, the eldest, the shark, the CEO of Blackwood Global Finance. He controlled markets. He toppled governments with interest rates. His face was pale, his jaw set so hard a muscle twitched beneath his skin. The hospital administrator, a balding man named Dr. Aris, ran up to them, sweating. "Gentlemen, you can't be in here with—" Adrian Blackwood simply stepped forward, towering over the doctor. "Our sister, Elena, where is she?" Dr. Aris blinked, confused. "Elena? We have an Elena Miller admitted as a Jane Doe, essentially, domestic violence victim, but she's listed as an orphan. Her husband is the next of kin." "Her husband," Julian said, the word tasting like poison in his mouth, "is a dead man walking. I am her next of kin. I am Julian Blackwood. Buy this hospital if you have to, Sebastian, but get me into that operating room viewing deck. Now." Sebastian tapped his phone screen. "Done. The hospital board just approved our presence. Lead the way, doctor." They watched from the gallery as the surgeons worked. Hours passed. It was 4 a.m. when the lead surgeon came out, looking exhausted. "She made it. the surgeon said, wiping his brow. "And the baby? A boy. He's in the NICU. It's a miracle." But she took a severe beating. Blunt force trauma. She kept muttering about a stick. Julian closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for years. He turned to his brothers. "We let her go," Julian said quietly. "She wanted a simple life. She wanted love, and we gave her space." "We gave her to a monster," Adrian growled, cracking his knuckles. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. "I ran a background check on Mark Miller while we waited. He's celebrating right now. He's at a club called The Velvet Lounge with a woman named Jessica Thorne. He posted a picture on Instagram. Caption, 'New beginnings, finally free of the dead weight.'" Sebastian pulled out his tablet. "Mark Miller, CEO of Miller Tech. He has a loan application pending with our bank for his IPO. He has pending lawsuits that I could unbury. He cares about his image. He cares about his money." Julian opened his eyes. They were cold, devoid of any mercy. "He beat a Blackwood," Julian said. "He beat a pregnant woman. He thinks he's powerful because he owns a mid-sized logistics firm." Julian walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights of New York in the distance. "Adrian," Julian commanded, "I want you to secure this hospital. Private security detail. Mossad level. No one gets in or out without your permission. If Mark Miller tries to come here to finish the job, break his legs. But don't kill him. Not yet." "Understood," Adrian said, pulling out his radio. "Sebastian," Julian continued, "I want you to prepare the legal framework. Divorce is too easy. I want total annihilation. Freeze his assets, but do it quietly. Let him think he's still rich for another 24 hours. I want him to feel the height of his arrogance before we drop him." "And you, brother?" Sebastian asked. Julian adjusted his cufflinks. "I'm going to buy the company he's trying to impress. I'm going to become his boss. And then I'm going to introduce myself." Meanwhile, at the Miller residence, Mark Miller was stumbling through the front door again, this time supporting a very drunk Jessica. They had spent thousands on champagne, celebrating Elena's eviction. "Do you think she's dead?" Jessica giggled, kicking off her heels. "Who cares?" Mark laughed, throwing the bloody walking stick into the fireplace. "She's the past. You're the future, babe. Miller Tech is going global next week. Once the IPO hits, I'll be untouchable. Even the Blackwood Brothers won't be able to ignore me then." He had no idea that the Blackwood Brothers weren't ignoring him. They were currently looking at his face on a giant monitor in a hospital waiting room, planning the systematic destruction of his entire existence. Mark's phone buzzed. It was a text from his lawyer. "Mark, great news. The investors from Blackwood Global want a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. They are interested in the IPO. This is the big league." Mark pumped his fist in the air. "Yes, see? I told you, Jess. Dumping that bad luck woman changed my fortune instantly. Blackwood Global wants me." He didn't know the meeting wasn't for an investment. It was for an execution. The morning sun filtered through the sterile blinds of the ICU recovery room, casting long shadows across the bed where Elena lay. The machines beeped in a rhythmic, hypnotic cadence, a reminder that life was fragile, hanging by a thread. Elena's eyes fluttered open. Her body felt like it had been run over by a truck. The pain in her ribs was a dull throb, and her leg was encased in a heavy cast. But her first instinct, primal and immediate, was to reach for her belly. "He's okay," a rough voice said from the corner. Elena turned her head slowly. Squeezed into a hospital chair that was far too small for him, sat Adrian Blackwood. The terrifying CEO of Blackwood Defense, known for negotiating hostage releases in war zones, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was undone, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the tactical watch he never took off. "Adrian?" Elena rasped, tears instantly welling up. "The baby?" "Liam," Adrian said, his voice softening as he stood up and walked to her side, taking her bruised hand in his giant, scarred palm. "We named him Liam. He's in the NICU. He's small, Ellie, but he's a fighter, just like his mother." Elena sobbed, a sound of pure relief. "I called. I didn't think you'd come." "We always come," Sebastian's voice floated in from the doorway. He walked in holding 2 cups of coffee, looking impeccable despite the circumstances, though his eyes were red-rimmed. "You're a Blackwood, Elena. You could have been on the moon, and we would have built a rocket to get you." "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, shame coloring her cheeks. "I just wanted to be normal. I met Mark. He seemed so nice. He didn't know about the money. I thought he loved me." "He loved a punching bag," Adrian growled, his grip on her hand tightening involuntarily before he relaxed it. "He loved someone he could control. And the moment you became an inconvenience, he showed his true colors." Julian walked in last. The room seemed to drop a few degrees in temperature. He was the eldest, the head of the family since their parents died in that plane crash 20 years ago. He looked at Elena's battered face, the purple bruising around her eye, the split lip, and a vein in his temple pulsed. "Did he use the stick?" Julian asked quietly. Elena nodded, unable to speak. "The walking stick our grandfather gave him?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Yes," Elena wept. He said I was a peasant. He said Jessica was his queen." Julian nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. He walked over to the bed and kissed Elena on the forehead. "Rest now, Ellie. Focus on Liam. We have a meeting to attend." "Don't kill him," Elena begged, grabbing Julian's sleeve. "Please, Julian, I don't want you to go to jail for him. He's not worth it." Julian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a shark smile. "I'm not going to kill him, Elena. Death is too quick. I'm going to make him wish he was dead. I'm going to strip him of everything he loves, piece by piece, until he is begging for the mercy of a jail cell." Across town, the mood was jubilant. Mark Miller stood in front of his floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom, adjusting the tie of his new $5,000 Armani suit. He looked at his reflection and saw a winner. "Babe, hurry up!" Jessica shouted from downstairs. "The driver is here!" Mark grinned. He had hired a limousine for the day. Today was the meeting with Blackwood Global. If he secured their investment, MillerTech's IPO would skyrocket. He would be worth $50 million by noon. He walked downstairs, stepping over the spot on the rug where he had dragged Elena by her hair just hours before. He didn't even look at it. He felt lighter, unburdened. "You look like a CEO," Jessica purred, straightening his lapel. She was wearing Elena's pearl necklace, a family heirloom Elena had left behind in the chaos. "Do you think they'll ask about the wife?" "Elena?" Mark scoffed. "She's history. If they ask, I'll say she was unstable. A gold digger I had to cut loose. These rich guys understand that. They hate clingy women." "What if she went to the cops?" Jessica asked, a flicker of worry in her eyes. "And say what?" Mark laughed, checking his Rolex. "It's her word against mine. I'm a pillar of the community. She's a nobody orphan. Besides, I know the chief of police." A little donation to the policeman's ball, and the report disappears. "Let's go. Destiny awaits." They climbed into the limo, pouring champagne as the car navigated the snowy streets toward the financial district. Mark Miller believed he was driving toward his coronation. In reality, he was being driven to the slaughterhouse. The headquarters of Blackwood Global Finance was a monolith of black glass and steel, piercing the Manhattan skyline. It was a fortress of wealth. Mark Miller and Jessica Thorne were escorted not to a standard meeting room, but to the boardroom on the 90th floor. The view was breathtaking, overlooking the entire city. "This is it," Mark whispered to Jessica, his palms sweating. "They don't bring small fish up here." They waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. Mark's confidence began to wobble. Maybe they got delayed? Jessica was fidgeting. "Mark, why is it so quiet? There's no secretary, no water, nothing." Suddenly, the heavy double doors swung open. It wasn't a team of investors. It was just one man, Julian Blackwood. He walked in with a predatory grace, carrying a single manila folder. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't smile. He walked to the head of the massive obsidian table and sat down. Mark stood up, flashing his best salesman smile. "Mr. Blackwood! An honor!" Truly. I'm Mark Miller, and this is my associate, Jessica. Julian didn't look at Jessica. He stared at Mark for a long, uncomfortable silence. Sit down, Julian said. It wasn't a request. Mark sat, his smile faltering. I assume you've reviewed the prospectus for Miller Tech. Our logistics software is revolutionary. We're projecting a 300% growth in Q3. I've reviewed it, Julian said, opening the folder. It's mediocre at best. Your margins are thin, your debt-to-equity ratio is dangerous, and your leadership is questionable. Mark bristled. Excuse me? If you're not interested... I didn't say I wasn't interested in the company, Julian interrupted smoothly. I said the leadership is questionable. Specifically, you. I built this company, Mark snapped. You inherited it from your father, Julian corrected. And in the last 3 years, you've leveraged it to the hilt to pay for sports cars, vacations, and consulting fees paid to Miss Thorne here. Jessica gasped. Mark turned pale. That's private internal data. How do you have that? I own the bank that holds your business loans, Mark, Julian said, leaning back. National City Bank? That's a subsidiary of Blackwood Global, and as of this morning, I personally reviewed your accounts. Mark laughed nervously. Okay, so you're the lender. That's good. We can restructure once the IPO launches. There will be no IPO, Julian said. The room went dead silent. What? Mark whispered. I invoked the moral turpitude clause in your loan agreement, Julian said, sliding a paper across the table. It states that if the CEO engages in conduct that damages the company's reputation, the bank can call in the full value of the loan immediately. Effectively, Mark, you owe me $12 million, right now. You can't do that. Mark stood up, slamming his hands on the table. What conduct? I haven't done anything. Domestic abuse is a crime, Mark, Julian said softly. Mark froze. That's a domestic dispute. It has nothing to do with business, and how do you even know about that? We'll get to that, Julian said, but currently you are in default. Since you cannot pay the $12 million, the bank is exercising its right to seize collateral. The collateral is Miller Tech. You're stealing my company? Mark screamed. I'm repossessing it, Julian corrected. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Miller Tech belongs to Blackwood Global. Security is currently escorting your staff out of the building to search for evidence of embezzlement. Your corporate cards have been canceled. Your company car has been reported stolen since you are no longer the CEO. Mark felt the room spinning. His phone started buzzing incessantly in his pocket. He pulled it out. Messages from his board members, his lawyer, his bank. All accounts frozen. SEC investigation launched. What did you do, Mark? Jessica stood up, her eyes wide with panic. Mark? What is he talking about? You said you were worth millions. I am, Mark yelled at her, sweat pouring down his face. He turned back to Julian. Listen, Blackwood. You can't do this. I'll sue you. I'll bury you in court. The doors opened again. Sebastian Blackwood walked in, holding a briefcase. He looked at Mark with a mix of amusement and disgust. Did someone say court? Sebastian asked, smoothing his silk tie. Hello, Mark. I'm Sebastian Blackwood. I run the legal division here. I also represent the plaintiff in the upcoming lawsuit, Miller versus Miller. Plaintiff? Mark stammered. Who? Your wife, Sebastian smiled. I've already filed for an emergency freezing of your personal assets as part of the divorce proceedings. The house? Seized. The bank accounts? Frozen. That watch on your wrist? Technically, that's marital property, so you might want to take it off before you leave. This is insane, Mark shouted. Why are you doing this? Why do you care about some random housewife? Did she sleep with you? Is that it? Is Elena sleeping with you? The temperature in the room dropped to absolute zero. Julian stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was inches from Mark's face. Mark, despite his rage, shrank back. Julian was emanating an aura of pure violence that terrified him. You think, Julian whispered, that Elena is a nobody? You think she is just some orphan you could beat with a stick and throw in the snow? She is a nobody, Mark spat. She has no family, she told me. She lied, Julian said. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not for her money. She wanted to protect herself from people like you. Julian grabbed Mark by the lapels of his expensive new suit and slammed him back against the panoramic window. The glass shuddered. Elena Miller, Julian hissed, was born Elena Blackwood. She is the sister of the Blackwood Brothers. And you, Mark, you just declared war on the most powerful family in New York. Mark's eyes bulged. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Julian, then at Sebastian. The resemblance. The eyes. It was undeniable. He had beaten the sister of the Blackwood billionaires. "Oh, God," Mark whispered. "God can't help you now," Julian said, letting him go so he slumped to the floor. "Get out of my building. Walk home. I believe it's snowing." 2 weeks later, the day of the hearing arrived. It wasn't just a divorce hearing. It was a spectacle. The steps of the New York Supreme Court were swarming with reporters. The story had leaked. Not the whole story, but enough. Tech CEO accused of brutal assault on pregnant wife. Mark Miller arrived in a taxi. His limo was gone. His company car was repossessed. He wore the same suit he had worn to the Blackwood meeting, but now it looked rumpled, hanging loosely on his frame. He had lost 10 pounds in 14 days. The stress of watching his company implode, his bank accounts freeze, and his friends abandon him had taken its toll. But he still had hope. He had Arthur Vane, the nastiest, most expensive divorce attorney in the city. Vane had promised him that without video evidence, it was just he said, she said. Mark had liquidated his secret offshore crypto account, the only money the Blackwoods hadn't found yet, to pay Vane's retainer. "Keep your head up," Vane whispered as they pushed through the paparazzi. "We paint her as hysterical. Postpartum depression psychosis. We say she threw herself down the stairs to frame you. It's ugly, but it works." Mark nodded, a cruel smirk returning to his face. "She's weak, Arthur. She'll crumble on the stand." They entered the courtroom. It was packed. But the air inside was different. It was heavy. On the left side, the gallery was empty. Mark had no supporters. Jessica Thorne was there, sitting in the front row, wearing large sunglasses and a headscarf, looking like she wanted to be invisible. On the right side, the gallery was a wall of black suits. The Blackwood security team lined the walls. In the front row sat Adrian and Julian Blackwood, looking like stone statues of judgment. And at the plaintiff's table sat Sebastian Blackwood. He wasn't just observing, he was the lead counsel. "All rise," the bailiff boomed. Judge Henry Thatcher entered. He was an old-school judge, known for being tough but fair. Mark felt a surge of confidence. He had played golf with Judge Thatcher 2 years ago at a charity event. He knows me, Mark thought. He knows I'm a good guy. "Case number 4920, the clerk announced. Sterling Miller versus Miller. Motion for immediate divorce, full custody, and criminal charges for aggravated assault." Sebastian stood up. "Your Honor, Sebastian Blackwood, representing the plaintiff, Elena Sterling Blackwood." The name rippled through the courtroom. Reporters gasped. Mark saw the judge's eyebrows shoot up. "Sterling Blackwood?" "Mr. Vane," the judge addressed Mark's lawyer. "You may proceed with your opening." Vane stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case of a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. My client, a respected CEO, is the victim of a smear campaign. His wife, suffering from mental instability, injured herself and is now using her powerful family, a family she hid from my client, I might add, to destroy him financially. We ask for the prenuptial agreement to be upheld and for joint custody of the child." Mark nodded. "Good. Strong start." Sebastian stood up slowly. He didn't use notes. He walked to the center of the room, holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was the shattered remains of the oak walking stick. "Your Honor," Sebastian began, his voice deep and resonant. "Mr. Vane speaks of mental instability. I would like to speak of physics. Specifically, the physics required to break a solid white oak walking stick." He placed the bag on the judge's bench. "This stick belonged to the defendant's grandfather. It is an inch thick. To snap it, one would need to generate approximately 200 pounds of force. Or one would need to strike a human femur bone with the velocity of a baseball bat. Sebastian turned to the jury box, then to Mark. "We don't just have the stick, Your Honor. We have the audio." Mark froze. "Audio?" "My client," Sebastian continued, "triggered a silent alarm on a burner phone hidden in the bushes after she was thrown out into the snow. The device began recording immediately." "Objection!" Vane shouted. "Hearsay! Unauthorized recording!" "Overruled," Judge Thatcher said, leaning forward. "Play it." Sebastian pressed a button on the remote. The courtroom speakers crackled. Then, the sound of wind. And then, Mark's voice. "Clear as day. If I see you here in the morning, I'll finish the job." Then, the sound of a heavy door slamming. Then, Elena's voice, weak and terrified, whispering to the operator about the stick, about the baby. The courtroom was dead silent. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at the jury. They looked disgusted. "That recording," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "was time-stamped at 12:05 a.m. The temperature was 18 degrees. My sister, 7 months pregnant, was left to die in a snowbank by this man." "It's fake," Mark blurted out, standing up. "It's AI. They faked it." "Sit down, Mr. Miller," Judge Thatcher barked, and Sebastian continued, ignoring Mark. "Mr. Miller claims he is a respected CEO. I would like to submit into evidence the financial records of Miller Tech. It appears that while his wife was couponing for groceries, Mr. Miller spent $400,000 of company funds on a mistress." Sebastian turned and pointed directly at Jessica Thorne in the gallery. Miss Jessica Thorne, who is currently wearing a diamond bracelet, purchased with funds stolen from the Miller Tech Employee Pension Fund. Jessica shrieked, covering her face as cameras flashed toward her. "I didn't know. He told me it was his money." "Order!" The judge banged his gavel. "We have the receipts, Your Honor," Sebastian said calmly, "and we have one final witness." The side doors opened. The room went still. Elena entered. She was in a wheelchair, her leg in a cast, her arm in a sling. She looked pale, fragile, but her eyes were dry. She was pushed by a nurse, but when she reached the witness stand, she refused help standing up. She gripped the railing, wincing in pain, and pulled herself upright. She looked at Mark. For the first time in years, she didn't look afraid. She looked at him like he was something she had scraped off her shoe. "Mrs. Miller," Sebastian said gently, "what do you want from this court?" Elena took a breath. "I don't want his money. I have my own. I don't want his apology. It's worthless." She paused, looking directly at the judge. "I want him to know that he didn't break me. He broke himself. I want full custody of my son Liam, and I want to ensure that no other woman ever has to feel the weight of that stick." Judge Thatcher nodded slowly. He didn't even look at his notes. "The court has heard enough," Judge Thatcher said. "Mr. Miller, your behavior is repugnant. The prenup is voided due to duress and abuse. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to the mother. Furthermore, due to the flight risk and the severity of the assault evidence presented, I am revoking your bail on the criminal charges." Mark's eyes widened. "Revoking? No, you can't." "Bailiff." The judge pointed a finger at Mark. "Take him into custody. Remand him to Rikers Island until his criminal trial." "No!" Mark screamed as 2 officers grabbed his arms. "I'm Mark Miller. I'm a CEO. Jessica, call the governor. Jessica." He looked back at the gallery. The seat where Jessica had been sitting was empty. Jessica Thorne ran. She didn't walk out of the courthouse. She sprinted in her red-bottom heels until one broke, and then she kicked them off and ran barefoot to the parking garage. She had heard Sebastian Blackwood's words clearly. Pension fund embezzlement. She wasn't just the mistress anymore. She was an accomplice. She reached her car, a white Mercedes convertible Mark had leased for her. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She needed to get to the apartment, grab the cash Mark kept in the safe, and get to the airport. She had a cousin in Mexico. She could disappear. She tore out of the parking garage, scraping the paint against the concrete wall. She arrived at the luxury condo Mark had rented for her, the one he kicked Elena out to make room for. she burst through the door and ran straight to the master bedroom closet. Behind a row of designer coats was the wall safe. She punched in the code, MARK1. The safe beeped and clicked open. It was empty. Jessica stared into the dark metal box. No. There had been at least $50,000 in cash there yesterday, and her passport, and the jewelry. Looking for this? Jessica spun around, screaming. Sitting in the leather armchair in the corner of the bedroom was Adrian Blackwood. He was cleaning his fingernails with a large tactical knife. Beside him stood two large men in suits holding duffel bags. "How did you get in?" Jessica gasped, backing away until she hit the wall. "I own the building," Adrian said casually. "My brother Julian bought the property management company this morning just so I could have a key. We're thorough." He kicked the duffel bag at his feet. "Your passport is in here, so is the cash, and the jewelry." "That's mine," Jessica cried. "Give it to me." "Technically," Adrian said, standing up and sheathing the knife, "it belongs to Miller Tech, which belongs to us, which means you are about to commit grand larceny." I didn't know," Jessica stammered, tears streaming down her face. She tried to use the charm that had worked so well on Mark. She softened her posture, pouting her lips. "Adrian, please. Mark tricked me too. I'm a victim here. He was abusive to me too. I can help you. I can testify against him." Adrian laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. "You think you can trade up? From a failing CEO to a Blackwood?" He walked over to her, looming over her. The smell of expensive tobacco and gun oil filled her senses. He terrified her in a way Mark never could. Mark was a bully. Adrian was a soldier. "You watched," Adrian said, his voice low. "Elena told us. You stood by the fireplace drinking wine and you laughed while he hit her. You told him to. Teach her a lesson." Jessica's face went white. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." "You have two choices," Adrian said, stepping back. "Choice A, you go to jail. We have evidence of you signing off on the fake invoices for the embezzlement. You'll get 10 years, minimum." Jessica sobbed. "Please, no. What's choice B?" "Choice B," Adrian said, tossing a burner phone onto the bed. "You go visit Mark at Rikers Island tomorrow. He's going to ask you for help. He's going to ask you to lie for him. You are going to wear a wire." "You want me to set him up?" Jessica asked. "I want you to destroy his last hope," Adrian corrected. "He thinks you love him. He thinks you're his partner. I want you to look him in the eye and tell him the truth, that you never loved him, that he was just a wallet to you. I want to break his heart before the inmates break his face." Jessica looked at the phone, then at Adrian. She realized she had stepped into a shark tank thinking she was a swimmer, only to realize she was the bait. "I'll do it," she whispered. "Good," Adrian said. He signaled to his men. One of them handed Jessica a bus ticket. "A bus ticket?" she asked, looking at the crumpled paper. "To Idaho," Adrian said. "My family owns a potato processing plant there. They're hiring sorters. Minimum wage. After you visit Mark, you get on that bus. If you're not on it, the police get the embezzlement file." "Idaho?" Jessica wailed. "I can't live in Idaho. I'm a model." "You're a criminal," Adrian said, walking to the door, "and as of today, you're a potato sorter. Be at Rikers at 9 a.m. He slammed the door, leaving Jessica alone in the empty apartment. She sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of the luxury she had briefly tasted, realizing that the instant karma she used to laugh about on TV had just come knocking on her door. The visiting room at Rikers Island was a purgatory of gray cinder blocks and scratched plexiglass. It smelled of industrial disinfectant, stale coffee, and the distinct, metallic scent of despair. For Mark Miller, a man accustomed to the plush leather of executive suites and the aroma of expensive cologne, this was a living nightmare. He sat on the metal stool, his knees bouncing nervously. He had been in custody for 2 weeks since his bail was revoked, and the time had ravaged him. His head had been shaved to combat a lice outbreak in his cell block, leaving him looking gaunt and exposed. The custom-tailored suits were gone, replaced by a baggy, ill-fitting jumpsuit that hung off his frame. When the heavy steel door buzzed open, Mark leaned forward, his breath fogging the glass. Jessica Thorne walked in. She looked different. Gone were the red-bottom heels and the tight designer dresses Mark had bought her with stolen company funds. She wore a simple gray tracksuit, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore no makeup, revealing the dark circles under her eyes. To Mark, however, she looked like salvation. He snatched the receiver from the cradle before she even sat down. "Jess, oh, thank God," Mark whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of relief and panic. "I thought you weren't coming. I've been calling you every day. The guards, they treat me like an animal here, Jess. You have to get me out." Jessica picked up her receiver slowly. She didn't meet his eyes immediately. She looked at the scratched graffiti on the metal counter. "Hello, Mark." "Forget hello," Mark hissed, glancing around at the guards posted by the door. "Did you get the money? The stash in the safe? Vane says if we can pay off the judge, or maybe hire a better expert witness to claim Elena is bipolar, we can still win this. I need that cash, Jess." Jessica finally looked up. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of the spark Mark used to mistake for adoration. "There is no money, Mark. The safe was empty. The Blackwoods, they didn't just freeze your assets. They repossessed everything. The condo, the cars, the jewelry I was wearing. Adrian Blackwood was waiting for me in the apartment." Mark's face twisted in horror. "What? No, that's impossible. They can't take your jewelry." "It was bought with embezzled funds, Mark," she said flatly. "It was evidence." Mark slammed his fist against the counter, causing a guard to take a step forward. Mark lowered his voice, sweat beading on his forehead. Okay, screw the money. We go to Plan B. You need to go to the press. Today, right after you leave here. Find a reporter, maybe TMZ. Tell them Elena attacked me. Tell them she was hysterical, that she threw herself down the stairs to frame me because I wanted a divorce. If you testify to that, the jury will have reasonable doubt. I'll walk." He paused, a desperate, manipulative smile creeping onto his face. "Do this for me, baby, and when I get out, we'll go to non-extradition. Brazil. We'll start over. Just you and me, like we planned." Jessica stared at him through the glass. She remembered the way he had laughed when he hit Elena. She remembered how he had thrown his pregnant wife into the snow like garbage. And she remembered Adrian Blackwood cleaning his knife in her bedroom. "Start over?" Jessica asked, her voice quiet. "With what, Mark? You're not a CEO anymore. You're a broke criminal. You have nothing." Mark's smile faltered. "I have you. We love each other, right?" Jessica leaned in closer to the glass. "I never loved you, Mark." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "I love the lifestyle," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I loved the penthouse. I loved the power. But you? You were just the wallet. And now the wallet is empty. You were never smart, Mark. You were just lucky to inherit a company your father built. And you were stupid enough to think you could beat a Blackwood and get away with it. You ungrateful witch," Mark shouted, his face turning purple. "I ruined my life for you. I beat her for you." "And that," Jessica said, unzipping the top of her tracksuit to reveal a small black microphone taped to her collarbone, "is exactly what the district attorney needed to hear." Mark froze. His eyes bulged as the realization hit him like a physical blow. "You're wearing a wire?" he gasped. "You set me up?" "I'm saving myself," Jessica said, standing up. "I made a deal, Mark. My testimony in this recording in exchange for immunity. Enjoy the cage, you built it yourself." "Jessica! No, Jessica!" Mark screamed, slamming the receiver against the glass as she turned and walked away. "Come back! You can't do this to me! I'm Mark Miller!" 2 guards seized him, dragging him back toward the cell block as he kicked and screamed, a man raging against the dying of his own light. 3 weeks later, the trial of The People versus Mark Miller concluded. It was not the sensational media circus Mark had hoped to manipulate. It was a systematic dismantling of his life. The prosecution played the audio from the burner phone. They played the recording from the jailhouse visit. They showed the photos of Elena's bruised body and the shattered walking stick. Mark's high-priced lawyer, Arthur Vane, had barely offered a defense. There was no defense to offer. On the day of the sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Elena sat in the front row, flanked by her brothers. She wore a white suit, looking like a statue of retribution. She didn't look at Mark. She looked only at the judge. "Mark Miller!" Judge Thatcher boomed, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case of such arrogant cruelty. You didn't just assault your wife. You attempted to erase her. You viewed her life, and the life of your unborn child, as inconveniences to your vanity." Mark stood at the defense table, trembling. He looked back at the gallery, hoping for someone, anyone, to look at him with sympathy. But the room was a sea of cold, judgmental faces. "The jury has found you guilty on all counts," the judge continued. "Aggravated assault, attempted involuntary manslaughter, grand larceny, and corporate embezzlement. I am sentencing you to 25 years in a maximum security state penitentiary without the possibility of parole for the first 15. The gavel banged. The sound was final. 25 years? Mark shrieked as the bailiffs cuffed his hands behind his back. "That's my whole life! You can't do this! Julian! Julian, help me! We're family!" Julian Blackwood stood up slowly from his seat. He adjusted his silk tie and looked at Mark with eyes as cold as the deep ocean. "We are not family, Mark," Julian said, his voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "You lost the right to that word when you picked up that stick. Goodbye." Mark was hauled away, sobbing, his cries echoing in the hallway until the heavy doors swung shut, sealing his fate. 6 months later, the bitter cold of winter had long since surrendered to a glorious golden summer. In the rolling hills of Idaho, inside a massive, noisy potato processing plant, a woman with rough, calloused hands stood at a conveyor belt. Jessica Thorne, once a socialite who wouldn't be caught dead without a manicure, was now wearing a hairnet and a stained apron. Her job was to pick out the rotten potatoes before they reached the slicer. It was grueling, mindless work. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the penthouse. But then she would remember the alternative, a prison cell next to Mark. She kept her head down and kept working. Karma had found her address. Thousands of miles away, in the exclusive enclave of the Hamptons, the air smelled of salt water and jasmine. The Blackwood estate was transformed. The expansive green lawn that overlooked the Atlantic Ocean was decorated with white linens, crystal glassware, and soft blue hydrangeas. It was a celebration, a christening for Liam Sterling Blackwood. Elena stood by the edge of the terrace, holding her son. Liam was 6 months old now, a chubby, happy baby with bright, inquisitive eyes. Elena looked out at the ocean, the gentle breeze catching the hem of her dress. Her leg had healed, though she would always have a faint, elegant limp, a scar of survival that she wore with pride. "He's going to be a heartbreaker," a voice said. Elena turned to see Sebastian Blackwood approaching, holding 2 glasses of sparkling lemonade. The shark-like lawyer was grinning, letting Liam grab his finger with a tiny, strong grip. "He's going to be a good man," Elena corrected with a smile. "That's more important." "We'll make sure of it," Adrian Blackwood added, joining them. The massive CEO of Blackwood Defense had traded his tactical vest for a linen suit, though he still looked like he could take down an army. He gently touched Liam's head. "I've already started drafting his security protocols. No one touches this kid." "Relax, Adrian," Julian Blackwood said, walking up to complete the circle. The eldest brother looked at peace, the perpetual tension in his jaw finally gone. "Let the boy be a boy. He has us. That's enough security." Julian looked at Elena. "You okay, El?" Elena looked at her brothers, the 3 terrifying, ruthless kings of New York who had dropped everything to save her. She thought about the night in the snow, the pain, the fear, and then she looked at the life she had now. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "I'm free." "You know," Sebastian mused, taking a sip of his drink, "I heard a rumor from the state penitentiary. Apparently Mark tried to appeal his sentence last week. He tried to claim he had affluenza." "And?" Adrian grunted. "Denied in record time." Sebastian smirked. "And rumor has it, his cellmate isn't a fan of men who beat pregnant women. Mark is having a very educational experience." "Good," Julian said, his voice final. Let him rot. We have a future to celebrate. Elena held Liam up to the sky, the sun illuminating his laughing face. She had walked through fire and ice to get here. She had learned that family wasn't about who you married, but who would bleed for you. Mark Miller had tried to break her, to turn her into a victim. Instead, he had forged her into something unbreakable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violet and gold, the Blackwood family stood together, a wall of strength that nothing could ever tear down. The wolves had protected their own, and for the first time in her life, the princess wasn't waiting for a knight. She was safe among the kings. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about physical force or how much money you have in the bank. It's about character. Mark Miller thought he was untouchable because of his title, but he learned the hard way that arrogance is the quickest path to ruin. He mistook his wife's kindness for weakness, and in doing so, he woke up a sleeping giant. The Blackwood Brothers showed us that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when it counts. Justice may sometimes be delayed, but as we saw with Mark and Jessica, karma always keeps the receipts. Elena's journey from a victim in the snow to a survivor surrounded by love proves that no matter how dark the night gets, the sun will always rise again. If this story of instant karma and justice satisfied you, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps support the channel. What would you have done if you were in the brothers' shoes? Would you have been as merciful as they were? Or would you have gone further? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have an even more shocking tale coming up next week about a cheating wife who didn't know her husband won the lottery. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.